Before the first frost. Good evening. Welcome back. Tonight we are in Stillwater Cove, Maine, where the tide comes in, and so do the secrets. Before we begin, if you enjoy what we do here, please like the video and subscribe. Tell us in the comments where you are and what time it is. Now get comfortable, turn off the lights, and let's find out what happened. September ends with fog and the first real chill of autumn. The light changes sometime in the third week, thinner, sharper. The sun already low by 4 in the afternoon. Anita Sousa had been in Stillwater Cove for 14 months when her bookshop burned. She had painted the walls herself, sanded the floors, carried every book up the front steps. She was getting there, slowly. Someone did not want her to finish. The fire started at 11 on a Wednesday night. By midnight, the building was gone. By morning, Nora Alcott was standing in the ash, her flashlight cutting through the smoke, her boots wet with water from the hoses. The stockroom corner was still standing. The metal box was bolted to the floor. The key was still in the lock. Chapter 1. The fire did not take everything. Nora arrived at Mill Street at 6:17 in the morning. The call had come in at 5:45. A neighbor saw the flames, called it in, and by the time the Stillwater Cove Volunteer Fire Department arrived, the building was already beyond saving. The fire marshal from Rockland was on his way, but the roads were wet with the season's first real dew, and he would not arrive until 8. The air smelled of wet ash and burned paper and something else, the sharp chemical stink of melted wiring and scorched insulation. The building was a 2-story Victorian converted to commercial space sometime in the 1970s. The ground floor had been Anita Sousa's bookshop. The upper floor had been empty for years. Now both were gone. The facade was still standing, but the windows were blown out, and the roof had collapsed in the middle. And the interior was a mess of blackened timber and sodden debris. The fire chief, a man named Frank Dyer, who had been doing this job for 30 years, stood by his truck with his helmet off and his face streaked with soot. He saw Nora approaching and walked to meet her. "Deputy," he said. "Frank, what do we know?" "Electrical, most likely. Old wiring, old building. The fire started in the back office, near the wall. That's where the heat was highest. We'll know more when the marshal gets here." Nora looked at the building. The back office was at the rear of the ground floor, which meant the fire had started in the bookshop itself, not in the upper floors or the basement. Most electrical fires started in walls or attics, places where wiring aged and insulation failed. A fire that started in an office suggested something else. A space heater left on, a lamp knocked over, or something deliberate. "The electrical panel," Nora said. "Where is it?" Frank frowned. "Basement? Why?" "It was moved in 1998 from the back office to the stockroom." Frank shook his head. "The panel's in the basement. Has been for as long as I've known the building." Nora filed that. If the panel had been moved to the basement, the fire could not have started from an electrical fault in the back office. Not unless someone had run new wiring, and there was no record of that. "Any sign of Anita Sousa?" she asked. Building was empty, no remains. "We did a full sweep before we started putting water on it." Nora walked closer to the building. The heat was still radiating from the debris even after the water. She looked at the stockroom corner, a small room at the back left of the ground floor, its wall still partially intact. The fire had burned outward from the office, not inward toward the stockroom. The wall had protected it. She walked to the stockroom corner and looked through a gap in the wall. The room was small, maybe 8 feet by 10, and the fire had barely touched it. Shelves still stood. A metal desk sat against the far wall, its surface covered in a fine layer of ash. And on the floor, near the desk, bolted to the wood beneath, was a metal box. She could see it clearly in the morning light. The box was about 12 inches by 8, gray metal with a lock on the front. The key was still in the lock. She pulled out her phone and took photographs. At 8 o'clock, the fire marshal arrived. Leonard Cross was a thin man in his 60s. with gray hair and the kind of face that had been investigating fires for so long that nothing surprised him anymore. Nora walked him through what she had seen. He looked at the stockroom corner. He looked at the metal box. "The box stays here until I get a warrant," Nora said. Cross nodded. "I'll have my report to you by tomorrow, but I can tell you one thing now." "What's that?" "Point of origin is the back office, but it wasn't electrical. Someone poured accelerant on the floor and lit it. The pattern is consistent with a liquid igniter. Gasoline, probably." Nora felt the confirmation settle in her chest. Arson. She drove to the diner. Harlow's diner was warm and loud, and the lunch crowd had not arrived yet, and the place was quiet. Iris was behind the counter, wiping down the surface with a rag that had seen better days. She saw Nora walk in and nodded toward the corner booth. Nora slid into the vinyl seat. Iris came over with a pot and a mug. "Anita Sousa," Iris said. It was not a question. "What do you know about her landlord, Owen Marchand?" Iris set the pot down and sat across from Nora. She did that when she had something to say. "Owen's been trying to get her out for 6 months. Wanted to convert the whole building to condos. She fought him, hired a lawyer, filed a complaint with the town." "Did he threaten her?" Iris leaned closer. "He said, in this diner, with me standing right there, 'You won't last the year.' I told him that was not a nice thing to say. He said, 'I wasn't trying to be nice.'" Nora wrote it down. "When was that?" 3 weeks ago. Anita was here. She heard him. She didn't say anything, just finished her coffee and left." Nora finished her coffee and left cash on the table. She walked to the Bellamy Library. Dot Fenwick was at her desk, cataloging new acquisitions. She looked up when Nora walked in. "The fire," Dot said. "The building, 1998 renovation. The electrical panel was moved from the back office to the stockroom." Dot did not ask why. She stood up and walked to the reference desk, where she pulled a thick binder from a shelf behind the counter. She flipped through pages quickly, her fingers moving with precision. The permit was filed in March of 1998. The panel was relocated from the back office to the stockroom. The work was done by a licensed electrician named Harold Finch. He retired in 2001. "So the panel is in the stockroom. Was, according to the permit, I don't know if it's still there." Dot looked up. "Why?" "Because the fire started in the back office. If the panel is in the stockroom, and the stockroom is untouched, the fire did not start with an electrical fault." Dot closed the binder. Her face was pale. "Someone set that fire." "I know." Nora walked to the door. "Who owns the building?" "Owen Marchand. His father left it to him in 2005. Nora walked out of the library and stood on the steps. The sun was fully up now, and the light was bright and cold. And the town was awake. Cars moved on Main Street. People walked past her with coffee cups and grocery bags. Owen Marchand had motive. He had been trying to evict Anita for 6 months. He had threatened her publicly. The fire had started in the back office, not near the electrical panel. The panel was in the stockroom. The stockroom was untouched. Arson. She got into her cruiser and drove to the Bluff Road. Chapter 2. The key was still in the lock. The drive to Owen Marchand's house took 7 minutes. Nora used them to think. The road curved along the bluff, and the harbor opened up on her left, gray and cold in the morning light. The tide was going out. You could see the mud flats where the gulls stood in patient rows, waiting for something to turn up. The big white house with black shutters sat at the end of a gravel drive. A black SUV was parked near the garage. The windows were dark except for a single light in the mudroom. Nora parked on the shoulder and walked up. The gravel crunched under her boots. The air smelled of cut grass and the faint salt of the harbor. Owen Marchand answered the door in a plaid shirt and leather slippers. He was 43, tall, with dark hair combed back, and a face that looked like it had been practicing neutrality for a long time. His hands were clean, his fingernails were clean, Everything about him was clean. "Deputy Alcott," he said. "This is unexpected." The house was warm and smelled of coffee and cedar. He led her to a sitting room at the back where the windows faced the harbor. He took a leather armchair. She sat on the couch. The cushions were deep and soft, the kind of couch that made you want to lean back and stay a while. Nora sat forward. "When did you last see Anita Souza?" "Saturday." "She came by the building to pick up paperwork. We didn't talk much." "You were trying to evict her." Owen shrugged. "I was ending her lease. There's a difference. The building needs work." Nora let the silence stretch. She had learned, years ago, that people filled silences if you waited long enough. Owen did not. He sat there with his hands on the arms of the chair and his face perfectly still. He was good at waiting too. She had a lawyer. She filed a complaint. She had every right. It didn't change the facts. "Where were you last night between 10 and midnight?" He smiled. It was a thin expression, the kind that did not reach his eyes. "Here, asleep. My wife can confirm it." "Where is your wife now?" "At work." "She left at 6. So you were alone?" "I was asleep. Deputy, alone. Yes, but still asleep." Nora wrote it down. She could feel the weight of the words he was not saying. They sat in the room with her, heavy and silent, like the furniture. "Did you know the electrical panel was moved from the back office to the stockroom during the 1998 renovation?" His smile faltered, just for a second, then it returned. "I didn't know that. I'm not an electrician." Someone who knew the building would know where the panel was. Someone who wanted to set a fire that looked electrical would start it in the back office, not near the panel. Owen stood up. "I think you should leave." Nora stood as well. The fire marshal found accelerant in the back office. Someone poured gasoline on the floor and lit it. That is arson. His face went pale. Not the pale of fear, the pale of calculation. He was figuring out what to say next, and he was taking too long. "I didn't set that fire," he said. "Then who did?" "I don't know. I wasn't there." She walked to the door. The floorboards creaked under her feet. She turned back before she opened it. "Don't leave town, Mr. Marchand." Outside, her phone buzzed, a text from Gannett. "Warrant signed. You can open the box." She drove back to Mill Street. The fire marshal's truck was gone. The forensic team had not arrived. The building was still standing, still smoking in places, still blocked off with yellow tape. She parked at the end of the block and walked. The air was colder here, closer to the water. She could smell the ash. The metal box was still in the stockroom corner. The key was still in the lock. She knelt in the debris, pulled on latex gloves, and turned the key. The lock opened with a soft click, a sound so small it should not have mattered, but it did. It was the sound of something giving way. Inside were documents, a USB drive, and a photograph. The photograph showed two women standing in front of a building with a sign that said Lowe and Associates. One was Anita Souza, younger, her hair longer, her face unlined. The other was a woman Nora did not recognize. Dark hair, sharp features, wearing a business suit. On the back, in handwriting that was small and precise, Patricia Lowe, Providence, 2019. Nora set the photograph aside and picked up the documents. The first page was a copy of the original lease from 1995, signed by Owen's father. The tenant was responsible for utilities and maintenance, the landlord for structural repairs and electrical systems. The second page was Anita's lease. Different terms, in hers. The tenant was responsible for everything, including electrical. Someone had switched the pages. Someone had forged a witness signature. The last document was a handwritten note, in Anita's handwriting, on yellow legal paper. "Owen changed the lease before I signed it. I didn't notice at first. The witness signature is different. He forged it." Nora read it twice. Then she put everything back in the box, carried it to her cruiser, and locked it in the trunk. At the station, she sat at her desk and made phone calls. Patricia Lowe was a businesswoman whose consulting firm dissolved 4 years ago after a civil lawsuit. The plaintiff had been Anita Souza. The case had ended Patricia's partnership with her then-husband. Now Patricia was in Stillwater Cove. She had arrived 2 months after Anita opened the bookshop. She had been here for over a year. The Seabird Inn confirmed she had checked in 3 days ago. She had left that morning. No return time given. The woman at the boarding house on the south end of town said Patricia had left before sunrise with a bag. She looked scared, the woman said. Nora sat in her cruiser and looked at the harbor. The light was changing. The afternoon was fading. The shadows were longer now, and the water was darker. She plugged the USB drive into her laptop. The footage was grainy, shot from a camera mounted on the back wall of the bookshop. The timestamp read 10:47 p.m. The alley was empty. Then, at 10:52, a figure appeared. Dark clothing, a hood. They tried the back door, found it unlocked, and went inside. 13 minutes. That was how long they stayed. 13 minutes was a long time. Long enough to search, long enough to set a fire, long enough to make a decision. They emerged at 11:05. 3 minutes later, smoke became visible from the back office window. Nora watched the rest of the files. In one from 2 weeks ago, a woman in a business suit got out of a car and knocked on the back door. Anita answered. They spoke for several minutes. Their body language was tense. The woman pointed. Anita stepped back. The woman walked away. The woman in the suit was Patricia Lowe. Then Nora opened a file labeled Camera 2. This camera was mounted on the building next door, facing the bookshop from across the alley. The first figure appeared again at 10:52, but this angle showed something else. A second figure, standing at the end of the alley, partially hidden by a dumpster, waiting. The first figure entered. The second figure waited. When the first emerged at 11:05, they exchanged words. Nora could not hear what, and then walked away in opposite directions. The fire started 3 minutes later. 2 people had been at the bookshop that night. One went inside. One watched. The fire started after both left. Nora sat back in her chair. Her neck was stiff. Her eyes were tired. She looked at the second figure on the screen. Smaller than the first. Lighter clothing. Standing in the shadows. Watching. She wrote a name in her notebook. Marco Souza. Anita's brother had driven up from Providence the week of the fire. He had a key. He had access. He was not answering his phone. Her phone buzzed. An email. A name she had not seen in a long time. DiMaggio. She looked at it for a moment. Then she put the phone down. She would read it later. At home. The cottage was cold. Beckett sat on the kitchen counter, on top of the mail. She fed him. She made a sandwich. She ate standing at the window, looking out at the darkening harbor. The lights of the town were coming on one by one. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She's in Portland. Leave her alone. She typed back. Who is this? No response. She called. Generic voicemail. No name. She set the phone down and looked at Beckett. He was washing his face with one paw, unconcerned. Someone is trying to scare me, she said. He yawned. She went to bed. Beckett curled against her side and began to purr. The wind picked up outside, rattling the old window frame. The forecast said rain by Friday, maybe sooner. Somewhere out there. Patricia Lowe was driving south. Somewhere in Stillwater Cove. Marco Souza was not answering his phone. And the second figure in the alley, the one who had stood watching, had not been identified. She had time, not much, but enough. Chapter 3. The Woman in the Shadows. The Seabird Inn was quiet when Nora arrived. The fog from the harbor had crept up the bluff, softening the edges of the white clapboard building until it looked like a photograph left out in the rain. She parked in the lot and walked to the front door. The wooden steps creaked under her weight. A brass sign beside the door said, "Ring for evening service." She rang. Magnus Torkel opened the door after a long moment. He was wearing a cardigan over a collared shirt, his gray hair combed back, his face as neutral as ever. He did not seem surprised to see her. "Deputy," he said, "it's late. I need to ask about a guest, Patricia Lowe." Magnus stepped back and let her inside. The lobby smelled of lemon polish and wood smoke. A fire burned low in the stone fireplace. He walked behind the front desk and opened the leather-bound register. "She checked in 3 days ago," he said, running his finger down the page. "Room 4. She paid with a credit card. Is she here now?" Magnus shook his head. "She checked out this morning. Early. Before the front desk opened. She left the key on the counter and a note saying she would settle the bill later." "Did she say where she was going?" "No, but she looked." He paused, choosing his words. "She looked like someone who was leaving in a hurry. Her bag was already packed. She didn't take breakfast. She didn't leave a forwarding address." Nora wrote it down. "Did she have any visitors?" "Anyone who came to see her. Not that I saw, but I wasn't watching." Magnus closed the register. His face gave nothing away. But Nora had learned to read the small things, the way his hands rested on the counter, the slight tension in his jaw. He knew more than he was saying. He always did. "Thank you, Magnus." She walked out into the cold. The fog had thickened, and the harbor was invisible beyond the edge of the bluff. The lights of the town were soft yellow smudges in the white. She drove to the boarding house on the south end of town. The yellow Victorian was dark, except for a single light on the second floor. She parked at the curb and walked to the front door. The wood was cold under her knuckles. The door opened. An older woman in a housecoat stood in the doorway, her gray hair loose around her face. She blinked against the light from Nora's flashlight. "Police," Nora said, holding up her badge. "Patricia Lowe. Which apartment is hers?" The woman pointed to the second floor. "At the front. Number 4. But she's not there." "When did she leave?" "This morning, before the sun was up. I heard her car start at 5. The woman wrapped her arms around herself. She looked scared. "Deputy, I've been renting rooms here for 22 years. I know what scared looks like. She had a bag with her, and she kept looking over her shoulder." "Did she say where she was going?" "No, just that she had to go. She said she was sorry for the trouble." Nora thanked the woman and walked back to her cruiser. She sat in the driver's seat and looked at the boarding house. Patricia Lowe was running. The question was whether she was running from something or toward something. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "I know who set the fire. I know where Anita is. Meet me at the lighthouse at midnight. Come alone." Nora stared at the screen. The lighthouse was on the north point of the cove, a quarter-mile past the bluff. It had been decommissioned 20 years ago. No one went there except tourists during the day and teenagers at night. She typed back, "Who is this?" No response. She called the number. Voicemail. A generic recording. No name. She looked at the clock on the dashboard. 8:45. She had 3 hours and 15 minutes until midnight. She drove home. The cottage was dark and cold. Beckett was on the couch, his yellow eyes glowing in the dim light. He did not get up when she walked in. She sat on the floor with her back against the couch. She did not turn on the lights. She sat in the dark and listened to the wind. At 11:15, she left the cottage. The rain had started, light and persistent, tapping against the windshield like a warning. She drove with her high beams on, watching the road for ice, for deer, for anything that might slow her down. The lighthouse road was gravel and dirt, lined with wild roses that had long since lost their blooms. The gate was open. Someone had been here recently. She parked at the end of the road and walked the rest of the way. Her boots crunched on the gravel. The wind pulled at her coat. The lighthouse was white and round. a black iron railing around the top, its light long since removed. A figure stood at the base of the tower. Nora stopped 20 feet away. She did not reach for her weapon, not yet. The figure turned. It was a woman, mid-40s, dark hair, business suit, wrinkled and damp. Patricia Lowe. "You came," Patricia said. "You said you knew where Anita was." Patricia nodded. She looked tired. Her face was pale in the moonlight, and her hands were shoved into her coat pockets, and her shoulders were hunched against the wind. She had been standing here for a while. Her cheeks were flushed with cold. "She's in the basement of the bookshop. There's a root cellar. Old, from when the building was a house. Most people don't know it's there." Nora felt her heart rate pick up. "Is she alive?" "Yes, at least. She was this morning. I've been bringing her food, water. She's scared. She won't come out." "Why not?" "Because she thinks I set the fire. She thinks I'm trying to kill her." "Are you?" Patricia looked up. The moonlight caught her eyes. They were wet. "No, I did not set that fire. I have been trying to protect her for months. She won't let me." Nora took a step closer. The wind whipped her hair across her face. "Who set the fire?" "Patricia." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. The wind rattled the iron railing above them. The harbor was dark and restless below. "Owen Marchand," she said. "He set the fire. He wanted to destroy the evidence, the documents in the box, the lease, the witness signature. He knew Anita had them. He knew she was going to the town with proof." "How do you know?" "Because I saw him, on the night of the fire. I was at the bookshop waiting for Anita. I saw him go in through the back door. I saw him pour the gasoline. I saw him light the match." "Did you call the police?" Patricia shook her head. "I was scared. I thought they would blame me. I have a record. Deputy, not criminal, civil. The lawsuit. Anita won. Everyone knew. I thought," her voice cracked, "I thought no one would believe me." Nora looked at the lighthouse, at the dark windows, at the iron railing swaying in the wind. "Where is Owen Marchand now?" "At his house, as far as I know. He doesn't know I saw him. He doesn't know I'm here." Nora pulled out her phone and called Gannett. He answered on the third ring. "Roy, I need you to pick up Owen Marchand right now. Arson. I have a witness." Gannett did not ask questions. "I'm on it." Nora hung up and looked at Patricia. The woman was shaking now, whether from cold or fear, she could not tell. "Take me to Anita." They walked back to the cars. Patricia got into a dark sedan parked near the gate. Nora followed her in the cruiser. The drive to Mill Street took 10 minutes. The streets were empty. The town was asleep. The building was dark, still cordoned off with yellow tape, still smoking in places. The air smelled of wet ash and cold rain. Patricia parked and got out. Nora followed. The root cellar was hidden behind a pile of debris that had been moved recently. A wooden door, old and weathered, lay flat against the ground. Nora had walked past it twice during her first investigation. She had not seen it. No one had seen it. That was the point. Patricia lifted the door. Dark stairs led down into a space that smelled of earth and cold stone. "Anita," Patricia called. Her voice echoed off the walls. "It's me. I brought the deputy. She's here to help." Silence. "Anita." A voice came from the dark, small, scared. "Is she alone?" "She's alone. No one else." Nora stepped to the edge of the stairs. The dark was thick and still. She could see a faint light at the bottom. A flashlight, maybe, or a candle. "Miss Souza," she said, "it's Deputy Alcott. You're safe. No one is going to hurt you." A long pause. Then footsteps on the stairs. Slow, careful. Each step a decision. Anita Souza emerged from the dark. Chapter 4. What the Cellar Held. Anita Souza was pale and thin, her clothes dirty, her hair matted. Her eyes were wide and dark, the eyes of someone who had been underground for too long. She looked at Nora, then at Patricia, then back at Nora. "Did she tell you?" Anita asked. Her voice was hoarse. She had not used it much in the past 3 days. "She told me about Owen, about the fire." Anita nodded slowly. She wrapped her arms around herself. Her hands were shaking. The cold had gotten into her bones. "I have proof," she said. "The documents, the USB drive, everything." "They're safe," Nora said. "I have them." Anita looked at Patricia again. Her face softened just a fraction. "Thank you," she said, "for coming back." Patricia nodded. She did not say anything. She just stood there, in the dark, in the cold, watching. Nora took off her coat and put it around Anita's shoulders. The woman flinched at first, then leaned into the warmth. "I'm going to take you to the station," Nora said. "You can give your statement there. You can rest there. No one is going to hurt you." Anita looked at the building, at the blackened windows, at the yellow tape, at the place where her bookshop used to be. "It's gone," she said. "Yes." Anita closed her eyes. Tears ran down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. "I built that place from nothing," she said. "I painted the walls myself. I sanded the floors. I carried every book up those stairs." She opened her eyes and looked at Nora. "He took everything." "Not everything." Nora said, "He didn't take the box. He didn't take the proof. And he didn't take you." Anita looked at the building for a long moment. Then she turned and walked toward the cruiser. Patricia stayed where she was. Her hands were still shoved into her coat pockets. Her face was still pale. "What will happen to her?" Patricia asked. "She'll be safe. That's what matters." "And Owen? He'll be arrested tonight. Your statement will be part of the case." Patricia nodded. She looked at the building, at the dark sky, at the harbor she could not see from here. "I should have called," she said. "That night, when I saw him, I should have called." "Yes," Nora said. "You should have." She did not say it to be cruel. She said it because it was true. Patricia flinched anyway. "I'm sorry," Patricia said. Nora did not answer. She walked back to the cruiser and got in. Anita was in the passenger seat, wrapped in Nora's coat, her eyes closed. The engine was running. The heat was on. Patricia stood alone in the parking lot, a dark figure against the dark building, watching them go. Nora put the car in gear and drove. The motel was on the edge of town, a low building with a neon sign that flickered and buzzed. The parking lot was empty. Nora parked near the office and went inside. The night clerk, a young man with a nose ring and tired eyes, took cash for a room and handed her a key. Room 12, end of the building, facing the parking lot. Nora walked Anita to the door and unlocked it. The room was small but clean. A bed, a desk, a window with curtains that did not quite close, a bathroom with a single flickering light. "This isn't permanent," Nora said. "Just for tonight. Tomorrow we'll find you somewhere better." Anita sat on the edge of the bed. She was still wearing Nora's coat. She looked small and fragile and very far from home. "Thank you, Deputy," she said. Nora nodded. She walked to the door and turned back. "Anita, is there anything you want to tell me about Patricia? About why she was at the bookshop that night?" Anita looked at the floor. Her hands were folded in her lap. "She came to apologize," Anita said quietly. "For what happened in Providence. For the lawsuit. For everything." "Did you accept her apology?" Anita was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I told her to leave. I told her I didn't want to see her. I told her she had done enough damage." Nora looked at her. The woman on the bed was not the same woman who had thanked Patricia in the root cellar. That moment of softness had passed. What remained was something harder, something older. "She brought you food," Nora said. "Water. She kept you alive. She owed me that." Nora did not argue. She walked out of the room and closed the door behind her. The parking lot was dark. The neon sign flickered. The rain had stopped, but the wind was still strong, pushing thin clouds across the face of the moon. She got into her cruiser and sat for a moment. The engine idled. The heater blew warm air against her face. Anita had not asked about Patricia, not once. Not where she was, not what would happen to her, not whether she was safe. Nora filed that away. She drove to the station. Gannett was at his desk. He looked up when she walked in. His face was tired, but there was a satisfaction in it that she had not seen in days. "Owen Marchand is in custody," he said. "His lawyer showed up 20 minutes after we brought him in. He's not talking." "He will." Gannett nodded. "What about the woman, Patricia Lowe?" "She's in Portland. I told her to stay there." "Do you believe her story?" Nora sat down at her desk. She pulled out her notebook and looked at the pages from the past 2 days. The fire, the box, the footage, the 2 figures in the alley. "I believe she saw Owen set the fire," she said. "I believe she was scared. I believe she ran. But she's not telling me everything. Someone else was in that alley. Someone she hasn't mentioned." Gannett raised an eyebrow. "The person in the hood." The person in the hood was taller than Patricia. "The footage doesn't lie." "Then who was it?" Nora shook her head. "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." She looked at the clock. 2 in the morning. She had been awake for nearly 24 hours. "Go home, Nora." Gannett said, "Get some sleep. The case will still be here in the morning." She stood up. She walked to the door and turned back. "Roy, did Anita say anything about Patricia when you talked to her?" Gannett frowned. "I haven't talked to her. You're the only one she'll talk to." Nora nodded. She walked out into the night. The cottage was dark. Beckett was on the couch, his yellow eyes glowing in the dim light. He did not get up when she walked in. She sat on the floor with her back against the couch. She did not turn on the lights. She sat in the dark and listened to the wind. The case was moving. Owen was in custody. Anita was safe. Patricia was in Portland. But something was wrong, something she could not name. She thought about Anita's face when she looked at Patricia in the root cellar. The softness that had appeared and then disappeared. The hardness that had taken its place. She thought about Patricia's story, the footsteps she had heard on the stairs, the person she had not seen. She thought about the figure in the hood, taller than Patricia, walking away from the bookshop at 11:05, calm and unhurried. Someone else had been in that building, someone who had not run. Someone who had set the fire. But Owen had confessed. Owen had poured the gasoline. Owen had lit the match. So who was the person in the hood? Beckett shifted on the couch. His head came to rest on her shoulder. She reached up and touched his fur. "Someone is lying," she said. "I just don't know who yet." He purred. She closed her eyes and let the exhaustion take her. The sun was rising when she opened them. The room was gray and cold. Beckett was still on the couch, still curled into a ball, still sleeping. She stood up slowly and walked to the kitchen, where she made coffee and stood at the window watching the harbor wake up. The boats were moving. The gulls were crying. The town was starting its day. There was a report to write, interviews to file, a case to close. But first, a question to answer. Who was the person in the hood? Chapter 5. The Confession. Morning came cold and gray. Nora arrived at the station to find Gannett already at his desk, a cup of coffee in one hand and a satisfied look on his face. "One Marchand spent the night in the holding cell," he said. "His lawyer showed up at 2 in the morning. A woman from Portland. Expensive. Good. Is he talking?" "Not a word. Just sits there with his arms crossed, staring at the wall." Nora looked through the window into the holding area. Owen sat on the bench, his back straight, his hands in his lap. He did not look up. He did not move. He had the patience of a man who had been waiting for something for a very long time. "He'll talk," Nora said. Eventually. Maybe, Gannett shrugged. But we have enough without him. The footage, the witness, the documents from the box. The DA is confident. Nora turned from the window. I need to talk to Anita again before she forgets anything. She's still at the motel. I had a deputy check on her an hour ago. She was awake. Nora grabbed her jacket and walked out. The motel was quiet. The neon sign had been turned off. And the parking lot was empty except for a few trucks and a dark sedan that looked familiar. She parked and walked to room 12. Anita opened the door before Nora could knock. She had showered and changed into clean clothes. Her hair was brushed, her face was still pale, but her eyes were steadier than they had been the night before. "Come in," she said. The room was neat, the bed was made, a half-empty cup of coffee sat on the desk, a suitcase was open on the floor. Nora sat on the desk chair. Anita sat on the edge of the bed. "I need you to tell me everything," Nora said. "About the lease, about Owen, about the threats." Anita took a breath. She looked at the window, at the gray light, at the parking lot beyond. "It started about a year ago," she said. "Owen came to the bookshop and told me he was planning to renovate the building. He said he needed me to move out for 6 months. I said no. My lease gave me the right to stay." "What happened then?" "He got angry. He said he owned the building and he could do whatever he wanted. I told him to talk to my lawyer." Anita's hands tightened in her lap. That's when he started changing things. The lease, the terms. He slipped a new page into my copy when I wasn't looking. Changed the responsibility for electrical repairs from him to me. Forged my signature. Forged a witness signature. "Did you confront him?" "Yes, he denied it. He said I must have signed it myself and forgotten. He said no one would believe me." Nora wrote it down. "Did he threaten you?" Anita was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was lower. He said, "You won't last the year." He said it in the diner, in front of people. Iris heard him. "I know, she told me." After that, he started coming by the bookshop at night. I would see his car parked across the street. He never got out. He just sat there, watching. "Did you call the police?" "I called the station once. They sent a deputy. By the time he got there, Owen was gone." Anita looked at Nora. "I didn't call again. I didn't think anyone would believe me." Nora set down her pen. "Anita, the documents in the box, the copies of the leases, the letters from your lawyer. You were building a case." "I was protecting myself. Why didn't you tell me about Patricia? About the lawsuit in Providence?" Anita's face went still. The color drained from her cheeks. "That was a long time ago. It had nothing to do with this. Patricia Lowe was at your bookshop on the night of the fire. She brought you food and water while you were hiding in the cellar. She kept you alive. She owed me that." Nora looked at her. The woman on the bed was the same woman who had emerged from the dark. Scared, grateful, desperate. But there was something else now, something harder. "Anita, what happened in Providence?" Anita looked down at her hands. She was quiet for a long time. "Patricia and I were partners," she said finally. "We started a consulting firm together. It was successful. Then she got involved with an artist named Sylvie Arnaud. Sylvie was selling paintings that weren't hers, forgeries. Patricia knew. She didn't stop it. So you testified against her." "I told the truth. Patricia went to prison. I took the business and moved on." Anita looked up. Her eyes were dry. "I don't regret it. She made her choices. I made mine." Nora stood up. "Thank you, Anita. I'll be in touch." She walked to the door and turned back. "One more thing. Did you see anyone else at the bookshop that night before the fire?" Anita shook her head. "No, just the smoke, just the heat. I ran to the cellar and stayed there." Nora walked out. The drive back to the station took 10 minutes. She used the time to think about what Anita had said. The lawsuit, the forgeries, Sylvie Arnaud. Sylvie was dead. Her killer was in prison. But someone was still asking questions. Someone had left a photograph in a hotel room. Someone had written questions on the back. Ask her about the Paris gallery. Ask her what she did in Montreal. Ask her why she left. Someone wanted Nora to dig into the past. Someone wanted her to connect Anita to Sylvie. But why? She parked at the station and went inside. Gannett was still at his desk. Anita confirmed everything. The lease, the threats, the forged signature. She's willing to testify. Gannett nodded. That's good. But she's lying about something. Gannett raised an eyebrow. What? I don't know yet, but she's hiding something. Something about Patricia. Something about Providence. Nora sat down at her desk. She pulled out her laptop and opened the footage again. The first figure in the hood. The second figure at the end of the alley. The fire. She watched it on a loop. 3 times. 4 times. 5 times. Then she paused the frame with the 2 figures in the same shot. She zoomed in on the second figure, the one Patricia claimed was her. She measured the height against the doorframe of the bookshop. 5 feet 4, Patricia's height. Then she zoomed in on the first figure, the one in the hood, the one who had gone inside, the one who had stayed for 13 minutes. 5 feet 9, at least. She sat back in her chair. The person in the hood was not Patricia. Patricia was too short. The person in the hood was someone else, someone taller. Someone who had been in the bookshop for 13 minutes. Someone who had set the fire. But Owen had confessed. Owen had poured the gasoline. Owen had lit the match. So who was the person in the hood? She picked up her phone and called Patricia. The line rang 4 times. Then a recording. You have reached Patricia Lowe. Please leave a message. Ms. Lowe, it's Deputy Alcott. I need to ask you one more question. The person in the hood, the one who went into the bookshop before the fire, how tall were they? Think carefully. Call me back. She hung up and looked at the footage again. The person in the hood had walked out of the bookshop at 11:05 p.m. Calm, unhurried. They had not looked back. They had not run. Patricia had said she heard footsteps and ran, but the footage showed someone who was not running, someone who was in control, someone who had known exactly what was happening. Nora stood up and walked to the holding cell. Owen Marchand looked up. His face was gray, his eyes red. Owen. Who else was in the bookshop that night? Owen did not answer. He just stared at her. I know you set the fire. I know you poured the gasoline. I know you lit the match, but someone else was there. Someone in a hood. Someone taller than Patricia. Who was it? Owen's jaw tightened. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Then it was gone. I don't know what you're talking about. You're lying. I'm not lying. His voice was flat. I was alone. Nora looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked back to her desk. The person in the hood had been in the bookshop for 13 minutes. Owen had been there too. They had to have seen each other. So why was Owen protecting them? She thought about the footage again. The first figure had entered at 10:52. Owen had confessed to setting the fire around that time, but the fire had started at 11:08 after the first figure had left. So Owen had set the fire after the person in the hood had gone, which meant the person in the hood was not the arsonist. They were something else, a witness, an accomplice, or someone who had been looking for something. The box, the documents, the USB drive. Someone had opened that box before Nora got to it. The key had still been in the lock. Someone had been there. Nora picked up her phone and called the fire marshal. Leonard, when you processed the scene, did you find any evidence that someone had been in the stockroom before the fire? Footprints? Fingerprints? A pause. The stockroom was the cleanest part of the building. Almost no smoke damage. We found a few partial prints, but they were old. Nothing fresh. So no one went in there that night. Not that we could find. Why? Because someone opened that box before I did. The key was in the lock. Someone had been there. Leonard was quiet for a moment. The key was in the lock when you got there. Yes. Then whoever opened it used the key that was already there. They didn't leave new prints because they didn't touch anything else. They just opened it, took something, and closed it. What could they have taken? I don't know. But if they were careful, and it sounds like they would have worn gloves. No prints, no evidence. Nora thanked him and hung up. She looked at the whiteboard. The names were still there. Owen Marchand, Patricia Lowe, Marco Souza, Anita Souza. She added a new name. The person in the hood. She circled it. Someone had been in that bookshop on the night of the fire. Someone who was not Owen. Someone who was not Patricia. Someone who had opened the box and taken something. Someone who is still out there. Her phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. I don't know how tall they were. It was dark. I was scared. I didn't look. Nora typed back. Think. Was the person in the hood taller than you? A long pause. Then, yes. Definitely taller. Nora set the phone down. The person in the hood was taller than Patricia. That meant they were at least 5'9". Could be a man. Could be a tall woman. She looked at the footage again. The way the person moved, the set of their shoulders, the length of their stride. It could be Marco. He was tall. He had a key. He had access. He had lied about knowing Patricia. It could be someone else. Someone she had not met yet. But whoever it was, they had been in the bookshop that night. They had opened the box. They had taken something. And they had left before the fire started. Nora stood up and walked to the window. The harbor was gray and choppy. The gulls were crying overhead. She had a new question now. Not who set the fire. Owen had done that. But who was the person in the hood, and what had they taken from the box? Chapter 6. The Sisters' Handwriting. The drive to Portland took 2 hours. Nora left at first light, the sun still below the trees, the harbor still dark. She drove with the window half open, letting the cold air keep her awake. The city was already moving when she arrived. Trucks on the highway, commuters at the coffee shops, the slow pulse of a place that never really slept. The Portland police station was quieter than she remembered. Detective Reyes met her at the front desk, a cup of coffee in his hand and a tired look on his face. She's still here, he said. Room 3. Hasn't said much, just that she wants to go home. She can go home soon. I just need to ask her a few more questions. Reyes led her to the interview room and opened the door. Patricia Lowe sat at the metal table, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee. She was wearing the same business suit, wrinkled now beyond repair. Her hair was pulled back in the messy ponytail. Her face was pale. She looked up when Nora walked in. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. Deputy, she said, please, I've told you everything I know. Nora sat down across from her. She did not take out her notebook. She wanted to watch Patricia's face. Miss Lowe, do you have a sister? Patricia's face went still. The color drained from her cheeks. Celeste, Nora said. When was the last time you saw her? Patricia looked down at her hands. They were shaking. 5 years ago, at our mother's funeral, we had a fight. She left. I haven't seen her since. What did you fight about? The business, the partnership, the lawsuit. Patricia's voice cracked. She blamed me for everything, for losing the firm, for losing the house, for losing our mother. Did Celeste know you were coming to Stillwater Cove? Patricia nodded slowly. I told her. Before I left, I called her. She didn't answer. I left a message. Did she call back? No. Nora leaned back in her chair. Miss Lowe, is there any chance your sister could have copied your handwriting? Patricia stared at her. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. I don't know, she said. Maybe. We learned to write together. Our handwriting was similar. People used to mix us up. Could she have gotten into your room at the Seabird Inn? The key was on the front desk. Anyone could have taken it. Could she have gotten into my house? Patricia's face went pale. I don't know. I didn't even know where you lived. Nora believed her. The fear was real. The confusion was real. Miss Lowe, where does your sister live? Portland. Or she did. I don't know if she's still there. Address. Patricia gave her an address on the east side of the city. Nora wrote it down. Don't leave Portland, Nora said. I'll be in touch. Patricia nodded. She looked small and defeated. Nora walked out of the interview room and down the hall. Detective Reyes was waiting. You want us to pick up the sister? Not yet. I want to talk to her first, alone. Reyes raised an eyebrow. You sure? I'm sure. The address was 20 minutes away, on a street of small houses and empty lots. The neighborhood was quiet, the sidewalks cracked, the trees bare. The house was gray, with white trim and a porch that sagged in the middle. A blue sedan sat in the driveway. Nora parked at the curb and walked to the front door. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. The door opened a few inches. A woman's face appeared in the gap. She was in her 40s, with dark hair and sharp features. She looked like Patricia, but harder, older. Celeste Lowe. Who's asking? Deputy Sheriff Nora Alcott. I need to talk to you. The woman's eyes narrowed. About what? About your sister. About the fire in Stillwater Cove. About the notes you left in my house and in your sister's motel room. Celeste's face did not change, but her hand tightened on the door. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Celeste stared at her for a long moment, then she stepped back. Come in. The house was small and cluttered. Stacks of papers on the coffee table, dishes in the sink, the smell of cigarette smoke and old coffee. Celeste led Nora to a living room at the back of the house and sat on the couch. Nora sat in a chair across from her. Where were you on the night of the fire? Celeste shrugged. Here, asleep. Can anyone confirm that? I live alone. Nora pulled out the photograph from her pocket. The woman who looked like Anita but was not Anita. She held it up. Do you know this woman? Celeste looked at the photograph. Her face did not change. No. This woman was at the Seabird Inn last summer. She left a photograph in her room. A photograph of Sylvie Arnaud, with questions on the back. Questions about Paris and Montreal. Celeste said nothing. The handwriting on the back of that photograph matches the handwriting on the notes left in my house and in your sister's motel room. Your sister's handwriting. I don't know anything about that. Ms. Lowe, your sister's handwriting is similar to yours. People used to mix you up. You could have copied it. You could have left those notes. Celeste's jaw tightened. Why would I do that? That's what I'm trying to find out. Celeste stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the street. Sylvie Arnaud ruined my sister's life, she said. Her voice was quiet. She was supposed to be the artist. She was supposed to be the one with the talent, but she couldn't sell her own work. She needed someone to sell it for her. Patricia did that. Patricia built her career, and Sylvie threw it all away. How? She got involved with those forgeries, the ones from Paris. She knew they were fake. She sold them anyway. And when she got caught, she blamed Patricia. She said Patricia was the one who supplied them. Patricia lost everything. Nora felt the pieces clicking into place. The lawsuit. The one Anita won. Celeste turned around. Her eyes were wet. Anita was Patricia's partner. They started the business together. When the lawsuit happened, Anita walked away. She took everything. The clients, the money, the reputation. Patricia was left with nothing. So Anita was the one who sued. Anita was the one who testified. She said Patricia knew about the forgeries. She said Patricia was the one who sold them. Patricia went to prison. Not prison, but close. House arrest, probation. She lost 5 years of her life. Nora wrote it down. Patricia Lowe had not mentioned any of this. Ms. Lowe, did you set the fire at Anita's bookshop? Celeste laughed. It was a bitter sound, hollow and sharp. No, I wanted to. I thought about it, but I didn't. Do you know who did? Owen Marchand. Everyone knows that. He confessed. Did you leave the notes in my house and in your sister's motel room? Celeste was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Yes. Why? Because I wanted someone to know the truth. About Sylvie, about Patricia, about Anita. Someone needed to ask the right questions. You were the only one who would. Nora looked at her. The anger was real. The grief was real. Ms. Lowe, you forged your sister's handwriting. You left notes that could have implicated her in a crime. You put her at risk. I know. Why? Because she wouldn't do it herself. She wouldn't fight back. She wouldn't tell anyone what Anita did to her. Someone had to. Nora stood up. I'm going to need you to come to the station. Celeste nodded. She did not resist. She walked to the door and put on her coat. Deputy, she said, I didn't set that fire. I didn't hurt anyone. I just wanted the truth to come out. Nora did not answer. She led Celeste to the cruiser and put her in the back seat. The drive to the station was quiet. Celeste sat with her hands in her lap, her face still, her eyes on the window. Nora used the time to think. Patricia Lowe had been convicted of selling forgeries. Anita Souza had testified against her. Anita had walked away with the business, the clients, the reputation. Patricia had lost everything. And now Celeste was trying to make it right, in her own way, in a way that had put her sister at risk. At the station. Nora sat Celeste in an interview room and closed the door. She walked to her desk and sat down. Gannett looked up from his paper. Anything. Celeste Lowe confessed to the notes. She's not a suspect in the fire. She just wanted someone to ask the right questions. About what? About Anita. About Patricia. About what happened in Providence. Gannett set down his paper. That's not our jurisdiction. I know. But it's the reason Celeste came to Stillwater Cove. It's the reason she left the notes. What are you going to do with her? Let her go. She's not a threat. Gannett nodded. The DA is moving forward with Owen Marchand. Arson, fraud. He's looking at serious time. Nora looked at the whiteboard. The names were still there. Owen Marchand, Patricia Lowe, Marco Souza, Anita Souza, Celeste Lowe. She had found the arsonist. She had found the missing woman. She had found the person who left the notes. But the person in the hood, the one who had opened the box and taken something, was still out there. And Patricia had not mentioned Celeste's visit to Stillwater Cove. She had not mentioned the notes. She had not mentioned anything. Nora picked up her phone and called Patricia. Miss Lowe, did you know your sister was in Stillwater Cove? A long pause. Then, no, I didn't. She left notes in my house and in your motel room. She forged your handwriting. Another pause, longer this time. Why would she do that? She wanted someone to ask the right questions. About Anita, about the lawsuit, about what happened in Providence. Patricia was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was small. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Nora believed her. Ms. Lowe, I'm going to let your sister go. She's not a suspect. But you need to talk to her. You need to work this out. I will, Patricia said. Thank you, Deputy. Nora hung up and looked at the whiteboard. The case was coming together, but one question remained. Who was the person in the hood? She walked to the holding cell. Celeste was sitting on the bench, her hands folded in her lap. You're free to go, Nora said. Your sister is waiting for you in Portland. Celeste stood up. She walked to the door and stopped. Deputy, There's something I didn't tell you. Nora waited. The photograph. The one of the woman who looked like Anita. I didn't leave it. I don't know who did. Nora felt a chill run down her spine. Are you sure? I'm sure. I only left the notes. Nothing else. Nora nodded. She watched Celeste walk out of the station and into the cold morning. Then she sat down at her desk and pulled out the photograph. The woman who looked like Anita but was not Anita. The questions about Paris and Montreal. If Celeste didn't leave it, then someone else had. Someone who wanted her to dig deeper. Someone who wanted her to connect Anita to Sylvie Arnaud. Someone who was still out there. She looked at the photograph for a long time, then she put it away and stood up. The case was closed, but the mystery was not. Chapter 7. Before the First Frost. The report took 2 hours to write. Nora sat at her desk, the words coming slowly. Each sentence weighed against the evidence. The fire marshal's findings, the surveillance footage, the statements from Anita Souza, Patricia Lowe, and Celeste Lowe. Owen Marchand's confession, not yet in writing, but the physical evidence made it unnecessary. Gannett came out of his office at noon, a cup of coffee in his hand. DA called. They're filing this afternoon. Arson, fraud, and attempted murder. Attempted. Anita was in the building. He knew she was there. That's enough. Nora nodded. She signed the last page of the report and slid it across the desk to him. Done. Gannett picked it up and read the cover page. His face was tired, but there was a satisfaction in it that she recognized. The satisfaction of a case closed cleanly. Good work, Nora. She stood up and walked to the door. Nora. She turned. The woman in the hood. The one who opened the box. Are you going to keep looking? Nora thought about the photograph still in her pocket. The woman who looked like Anita but was not Anita. The questions about Paris and Montreal. The person who had left it in Garrett Wells's room, hoping she would find it. Yes, she said, but not today. She walked out. The motel was quiet. The neon sign had been turned off, and the parking lot was empty. Nora parked and walked to room 12. She knocked. Anita opened the door. She looked better than she had the day before, rested, clean, her hair brushed, but her eyes were still wary. The DA is filing charges against Owen. Nora said, You're safe. You can go home when you're ready. Anita nodded. She did not invite Nora in. There's one more thing, Nora said. Patricia Lowe. She's in Portland. Her sister Celeste was the one who left the notes in my house and in your brother's room. She wanted someone to ask the right questions. Anita's face did not change. What questions? About Providence. About the lawsuit. About what you did to Patricia. For a long moment, Anita said nothing. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. You better come in. The room was the same. The bed was made. A suitcase sat on the floor, closed and zipped. Anita sat on the edge of the bed. Nora took the desk chair. I told you before, Anita said. I told the truth. Patricia was selling forgeries. She knew it. I couldn't protect her. You could have stayed. You could have helped her rebuild. Instead, you took everything and left. Anita looked at the window. The curtains were drawn, but light leaked through the edges, thin and gray. You don't know what it was like, she said. The threats, the lawyers, the reporters camped outside the office. I lost clients. I lost friends. I lost 2 years of my life cleaning up her mess. And Patricia. Patricia went to prison. She did her time. She's free now. I don't owe her anything. Nora stood up. She did not argue. She did not judge. She just looked at the woman on the bed and felt something she could not name. Goodbye, Anita. She walked out. The drive home took 10 minutes. The harbor was gray and choppy, the gulls crying overhead, the boats moving slowly through the channel. The first frost of the season was forecast for tonight. The cottage was cold. Beckett was on the couch, his yellow eyes glowing in the dim light. He did not get up when she walked in. She sat on the floor with her back against the couch. She did not turn on the lights. She sat in the dark and listened to the wind. The case was closed. Owen Marchand would go to prison. Anita Souza would rebuild her life. Patricia Lowe would go home. Celeste Lowe would face whatever consequences came. But the photograph was still in her pocket, the questions were still unanswered, and the person in the hood, the one who had opened the box and taken something, was still out there. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Not the same number as before, a new one. "She's safe. Thank you." Nora stared at the screen. 3 words, a name she had not expected. She typed back, "Who is this?" No response. She called the number. Voicemail. A generic recording. No name. She put the phone down and looked at the ceiling. The crack was still there, the one that looked like a map of the Maine coast. Someone was watching. Someone had been watching all along. Someone who knew about Sylvie Arnaud. Someone who knew about Renee Beaumont. Someone who knew about the forgeries and the lawsuit and the fire. Someone who wanted her to find the truth. She thought about the photograph again. The woman who looked like Anita but was not Anita. The questions about Paris and Montreal. The connection to Sylvie Arnaud. She thought about Garrett Wells, the man who had come to Stillwater Cove to clear Sylvie's name. The man who had left a photograph in his room. The man who had disappeared. She thought about Renee Beaumont, Sylvie's sister, the one who had supplied the forgeries, the one who had let Sylvie take the blame. Someone had wanted her to ask about Renee. Someone had left that photograph in Garrett Wells's room, hoping she would find it, hoping she would dig deeper. And she had. But she had not found the answer. Not yet. She stood up and walked to the kitchen. She made coffee. She stood at the window and watched the harbor darken. The lights of the town were coming on one by one. Beckett jumped off the couch and wound himself around her ankles. She reached down and picked him up. He was heavy and warm, and he purred against her shoulder. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow, I start again." He blinked. She put him down and walked to the bedroom. She lay on the bed and closed her eyes. The wind rattled the window. The house creaked and groaned. The dream came back. She was standing in an alley, the same alley from the footage, but different, darker, colder. The buildings were taller, the shadows were deeper. A figure stood at the end of the alley, watching. The figure stepped forward. She woke with her heart racing and her breath shallow. Beckett was still there, warm and solid against her side. The room was dark. The wind was still blowing. She sat up and looked at the window. The frost was forming on the glass, the first frost of the season. She thought about the text message. "She's safe, thank you." Someone was still out there. Someone who knew more than she did. Someone who was watching. She would find them. Not today, but soon. She lay back down and closed her eyes. Beckett purred. The wind blew. The frost crept across the window. Tomorrow, she would write her report. Tomorrow, she would close the case. Tomorrow, she would start the next one. But tonight, she would rest. That's all from Stillwater Cove for tonight. Nora will be back soon. Until then, stay curious and stay warm. The frost came the next morning, white and silent, covering the harbor and the rooftops and the empty lot where the bookshop used to be. Nora stood at her kitchen window and watched the sun rise over the water. Beckett sat on the counter, his tail curled around his paws, his yellow eyes half closed. Somewhere out there, in the cold and the dark, the truth was still waiting. She would find it. Not today. Maybe. But soon.